popping all that bullshit. I be seeing you, Jimmy, talking about we Gucci boo boo. He in the Gucci store, talking about we Gucci boo boo. The Black King was going up. Jimmy like, Marita Moneda. Coca-Cola.
It sounds like he want to do one with 50 Cent. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like Jim.
Nah, I don't want to do nothing with that sucker. You heard? Leave him out of the conversation.
Jim Jones. Who is Jim Jones? Like, he's not on anyone's top 10 list. He's like no one's top 10 list. Maybe not even his family.
When Jay did the remix, it was the biggest alley-oop he could do for me. I understood a lot about music, and at that time, people were looking at the wrong way, and I was looking at the right way.
50 Cent just destroyed Jim Jones for dissing Nas, and he dropped this rare footage showing how Jim flipped on Jay-Z and went from calling Jay soft to begging for a Roc Nation deal.
If I told you I was in the Roc Nation office, how would you feel about that? Huh? You think I was lying? That's clear enough for you?
As you all probably know, 50's never been a fan of Jim or Jay, but he respects Nas. So when Jim recently started running his mouth about being better than Nas and claiming he made Nas viral again, 50 took that personally.
I did for Nas probably never been done for him in his life. He's never been that viral at all, ever.
And what 50 just exposed isn't just about Jim disrespecting Nas. It's about Jim's long history of disloyalty and snake behavior. Jim has been flipping the script for years, switching between beef and begging, disrespect and submission, especially when it comes to Jay-Z. Here's the thing, Jim spent over a decade throwing shots at Jay, and he even slapped one of Jay's executives, but when Jim needed a deal, he crawled back to Jay-Z, calling him a hero and begging to be signed. So now 50 is using this moment to remind everyone who Jim really is. A man with no loyalty, no real stance, and zero respect for the culture he claims to represent. But that's just the surface. There's a whole story here about how Jim's disrespect of Nas backfired spectacularly, because it invited people like 50 to dig into Jim's past and expose everything. So let's break down how Jim went from dissing Jay to bending the knee.
Certain people shouldn't be able to say your names until they've done something in the genre of music. I've done too much in this music to even have to answer that question. Like Jim Jones, who is Jim Jones?
We all know 50 Cent doesn't hold back on calling out fake players, and his recent comments about Jim Jones being Jay-Z's lapdog after Jim disrespected Nas put the spotlight on Jim's chronic flip-flopping. In case you missed it, Jim claimed he's better than Nas, and he even got into it with Shannon Sharpe, claiming he can run circles around Nas in the booth.
I'm way more influential than Nas, and I don't care what nobody say. I know I made a little boo-boo when you talk about the sales and all this type. I don't feel like getting into that rhetoric about where I started and where he started.
Well, you said that.
But listen, Nas was nice when I was in high school. When I was in 10th grade, Nas came out. Nas was dope. We appreciated him. He had a little bit run. But Nas always came up second to Jay and DMX and all these other people.
But lyrically, I'm gonna keep it a stack with you.
Yeah, but look how you dress. Look how you dress. You don't even be in the same places I be in. The things that we listen to.
I can be in the church house. You can't ever Nas lyrics. I don't know who told you that. Now look, I know you on that good stuff, but you're not seeing Nas. You're not seeing Nas, bro. Let's be real.
You got a bunch of 40 and 50-year-olds in their panties because I said I'm better than Nas.
It don't matter.
Look at you.
Hey,
I will run circles around Nas rapping right. I will run circles around Nas rapping right now. Right now, I will run Saturn around Nas right now rapping. Everybody knows that.
And while a whole bunch of rappers checked Jim for saying he's nicer than Nas, Jim doubled down, and he even bragged about how he made Nas relevant again for the first time since Nas beefed with Jay-Z.
Ever. He's never been talked about like this ever in his life.
Now, has Nas
you did the last time he was in some this when people were comparing when him and Jay was beating on him. You heard?
And since Jim brought up Jay, you already know 50 Cent had to step in and remind Jim about his own history with Jay. And here's what 50 did. He dropped this old clip of Jim at Roc Nation headquarters acting all giddy and excited. And in the caption, 50 took the opportunity to flex on Jim saying, "Someone asked me if I have more enemies than friends. I thought about it and said, yes, poor me. I'm suffering from success. Lol."
If I told you I was in the Roc Nation office, how would you feel about that? Huh? You think I was lying?
That's clear enough for you? Talk to me. Let me know your sentiments. You heard?
Now, you might think 50 is just being petty, but his post hit harder if you know the whole history of Jim Jones and Jay-Z's relationship. See, Jim spent 13 years dissing Jay-Z hardcore with public shots, diss tracks, and even street fights. But when it suited him, he flipped completely and begged for Jay's blessing. And that's the whole point. Jim's recent Nas diss is the kind of move that's going to backfire big time, because it's bringing Jim's whole shady past back into the spotlight. But hold up, how did Jim go from dissing Jay and slapping one of Jay's executives to begging Jay to sign him? Let's rewind. It all started in 2002 when Cameron and Jim Jones were brought into Rockefeller by Dame Dash. Jim even claimed that Cam was promised a vice president role at Rock. However, Jay never announced this publicly. Cam told the source later that year, "I don't even know if I'm gonna take on the role as of yet. Me and Dame are still talking about it, but I mean, I can have it. It's mine." But see, Jay signed off on this and he told the source that's not taking effect as of yet. I think the talk is a little premature as of right now, so the tension was there from the jump. Then Jay recorded a remix of Cam and Jewel Santana's hit Oh Boy, dropping a verse that dissed Nas. But Cam and Jim refused to release the remix, and Cam decided to erase Jay's verse, later saying that he wasn't about to let Jay use their song to settle his beef.
I did a little something for you in the studio. Then he had something to Oh Boy.
This is Oh Boy's already #1?
Yeah, it's popping. I listened to it and I was like, erase that shit.
And that moment set the tone. Jim and Cam felt Jay didn't respect them. And this is when the Sneak Shots era started. Jim started calling out Jay more often in interviews and radio appearances, painting him as disconnected from the streets, corporate, and soft.
First of all, let's get right to it. There seems to be some drama. You and The Rock, Jay-Z, you try to diss. You did diss him. I diss nobody. You dissed him. I dissed Michael Jordan. Oh man, we just having fun out here. There's no drama, man. No, we're gonna get to that. Shouts to Dame Dash, who started Rockefeller Records. If y'all don't know, he's responsible for Rockefeller getting off the floor. That started in Harlem. You know what I'm talking about?
Jim really wanted to make it clear that Dipset's movement was raw, flashy, and aggressive, while Jay was more buttoned up and business-minded. Jim leaned into that contrast, claiming the streets left Jay behind.
I'm on there, Jones.
Capo.
Burning the streets up. Y'all know what it is, man. Purple Haze coming out. My dude Cam album coming out. Jewel Santana, he's slated for September. You know what they call me, Geronimo Pratt. Dipset, the new Black Panther. Want no problems. I promise you that.
Now, initially, Jay didn't respond directly. However, everyone knew there was friction inside Rockefeller. Fast forward to 2006, and Jim drops We Fly High. The song exploded, and ballin' became a cultural catchphrase.
Yeah, I'm sitting clean with the bottom kitted. I hopped out sagging jeans in my rock listen. But I spent about $8 grand, mommy on stage, doing the rain dance.
Jim finally had a solo hit, and that's when Jay-Z knew he had to respond. He dropped Brooklyn High, a remix of Jim's own beat. However, it wasn't homage, it was a diss.
Brooklyn getting paper, so big things. We take around, they all ball game. It's over for you dames. Give me back the chain, it's over for you dames.
Jay mocked Jim's style, his bars, even his ad-libs. It was surgical, cold, and dismissive. But then Jim clapped back with the beef mix, flipping the beat again and going directly at Jay, calling him old, out of touch, and weak. But this is where it got really wild and the beef spilled into the real world. In 2008, Jim was caught on security footage putting his hands on someone in a Louis Vuitton store, and it was later revealed that the victim was Jay-Z's longtime A&R, Lenny Santiago. Jim got arrested for this and later pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault.
Jim Jones, the rapper, is going down. Jim Jones. Jim Jones.
Now, as for Jay, he didn't say anything publicly about the incident, but behind the scenes, the message was clear. This wasn't rap beef anymore. It was personal. A few months later, Jay did an interview with XXL talking about the state of rap music, and he took shots at Jim, saying that songs like Jim's Nah 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 are what's ruining the culture. Jay said, I mean like Jim Jones, for example, and I don't mean this because we never see eye to eye. He made Nah Nah Nah. What's the difference between Smiley Face by Trey Songz and Soulja Boy? And Nah 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 could have been called Smiley Face. So now you had Jay taking strategic shots. Maybe he wasn't in the streets, but he still found a way to clown Jim without getting his hands dirty. But from this point on, the beef turned into a Cold War. Between 2010 and 2015, there were no diss tracks or altercations, just quiet tension. However, jump to 2015, and Dipset drops a freestyle over Diddy's victory beat. Cam and Jim both throw shots at Jay and Rock Nation, mocking the whole brunch wave, calling the label industry puppets, and even referencing Beyonce. Cam rapped, having money that don't make you a real one. You stepped on the court, you gonna play my game. Just take Shotty's advice and say my name. This was their way of trying to reignite beef, but by that point, Jay-Z was a billionaire. He's married to Beyonce, collecting art, launching his own streaming service, branching out into sports management. In other words, he didn't care about Jim and Cam still yelling from the sidelines. In fact, a clip of Jay recently resurfaced where he said exactly this, comparing himself to Michael Jordan and saying Jim is like the 8th guy on the bench screaming at the MVP.
What's up with that Jim Jones, man? Hip hop, of course, you know, is a competitive sport, but on the other end of it, it's like certain people shouldn't be able to say your names until they've done something in the genre of music. I've done too much in this music to even have to answer that question. Like Jim Jones, who is Jim Jones? Like, he's not on anyone's top 10 list. He's not no one's top 10 list, maybe not even his family. I was saying last night, it's like the 8th guy on the bench just screaming at Jordan, like, you a bum. Like, you want to be like the 9th guy on the bench. I'm not even worried about you.
And this is where Jim realized he was just embarrassing himself by trying to diss Jay. And what he did next is exactly what 50 Cent is now clowning him for. Jim did a 180 and started begging Jay to sign him. And it finally happened in February 2017 when Jim signed a deal with Rock Nation. And after 13 years of beef, he officially joined Jay's team.
Jay's longtime nemesis turned collaborator Fat Joe signed to Rockefeller, and now it looks like another former rival will be relying on Hov's team to steer his career, as Dipset's Jim Jones is allegedly heading over to Rock Nation. Capo posted a picture of bottles of Douce and Ace of Spades next to a Rock Nation letterhead on IG and told fans to caption this.
And he didn't just sign quietly either. He started bragging about getting invited to Jay's Rock Nation brunch, the same one he used to diss. He began praising Jay in public, and he was just doing the most to show his loyalty to Jay.
If anybody getting fancy checks, shit with us. Cocaine, we did that.
The same man who used to clown Jay for being soft, accused him of betraying the streets, and slapped his friend was now talking about how Jay was always his role model. But once again, Jay stayed quiet. There was no public post to congratulate Jim on signing with Rock Nation, no welcome speech. There's actually just one single photo of Jay and Jim after Jim signed with Rock Nation. And even in this picture, Jay looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. Jim finally got to sit at the table, but Jay made it clear that they weren't on equal footing and never would be. Jim was just another name in the Rock Nation folder, which is kind of funny because for over a decade, from 2002 to 2017, Jim made a name for himself partly by bragging about not being Jay-Z. He positioned Dipset as the anti-Rock Nation, the street alternative to Jay's corporate image. But in the end, the money won, and the image Jim spent over a decade building collapsed the moment he needed a deal. Jay-Z didn't need to diss him. He didn't need to respond. He just waited. And when Jim finally bent the knee, Jay took the meeting, signed the contract, and kept it moving. And that's exactly 50 Cent's point. Jim spent years dissing Jay, but in the end, he was the one begging for a seat at the table. Now, most people would have probably forgotten about this if Jim didn't make the mistake by disrespecting Nas's legacy. But when he did that, Jim invited people like 50 to dig deep and expose Jim's long history of flip-flopping and fake loyalty, and the receipts are too heavy. Now, the question is, how far will this fallout go? Will Jim's career survive the damage done?